Every great application, every massive system that serves millions of people, they all start somewhere. And almost always, they start with just one single step on one single server. This is that story. It's about that first crucial move, the foundation of a founder's journey from just an idea to a service people actually use. So let's dive in and see how it all begins.
All right, so here's the plan. We'll start with the first step, getting that idea off the ground. Then we'll get into the beauty of simplicity and why starting this way is so smart. After that, we hit the inevitable growing pains because success brings problems. And finally, we'll talk about preparing for scale and what you need to think about next.
Okay, so you've got this brilliant idea, right? Look, the goal on day one isn't to build something that can handle 1 million users. No way. The real goal is just to get a product that works up and running as fast and as simply as you can. And this is where that journey begins. So this starting point has a name. It's called a single server setup, or sometimes you'll hear it called a monolith. And the idea is just beautifully simple. Everything your app needs to actually run, we're talking the web server, all your application code, and the database, the whole shebang lives together on one single machine.
And here's what that looks like in action. A user sitting at their computer sends a request. That request first hits your web server. The web server then hands it off to your application's logic. Now, if the app needs to, say, look up a user's profile, it turns around and talks to the database. And here's the key part. All of this happens inside that one single box. Every component is sharing the same exact CPU, the same RAM, the same hard drive. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, wow, that seems almost too basic. But trust me, for a brand new project, that simplicity, it's a superpower. Let's really dig into the advantages and see why pretty much every journey starts right here.
First and foremost, it is just so simple. Think about it. When your entire app lives in one spot, you can develop way faster. Got a bug? Well, debugging is a piece of cake because you're not hunting for the problem across a dozen different machines. And deploying a new version of your app? You just update the code on that one server. It's about as clean and straightforward as it gets. Next up is cost. And this one's a biggie, especially if you're a startup or just kicking off a new project. It's pretty simple. You're only paying to rent one server. That's it. The financial barrier to just getting your idea out there for people to see is as low as it can possibly get. You've got almost no maintenance overhead to stress about. And finally, let's talk speed. I mean, speed to market. When you put that simple development and that low cost together, what do you get? You get the absolute fastest path from an idea rattling around in your head to a real live product that actual users can click on and play with. It is the perfect setup for testing an idea, getting that crucial early feedback, and finding out if you've really got something special. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? Here's the twist. The very success that this beautifully simple setup helps you achieve, well, that success eventually becomes its biggest problem. As more and more users find your amazing app, that one little server really starts to feel the strain. I mean, just picture it. Your app is a hit. You're getting written up in blogs, people are talking about it, traffic is spiking. So what happens when your small, efficient little operation suddenly has a giant crowd banging on the virtual door? Well, this is where the cracks really start to show. And that really is the core problem, right? That one server just gets completely overwhelmed when too many people show up at once. The food truck analogy is perfect here. Think of your server as a food truck with one single heroic chef doing everything, taking orders, cooking the food, taking the payment. When there are only a few customers, it's super efficient. But when that massive lunch rush hits, that one chef becomes a massive bottleneck, and it's just total chaos. This right here exposes the biggest, most glaring risk of a single server setup. Because literally everything depends on that one machine. If it fails for any reason, could be a hardware problem, could be a weird software bug, the entire system just goes dark. There's no backup, there's no plan B. When the server goes down, your application is gone.
In the world of system design, we have a name for this. It's a single point of failure, or SPO for short. It's a classic term, and it just means any one part of a system that, if it breaks, takes the whole thing down with it. In this setup, the server itself is the ultimate SPO. No backup, no redundancy, nothing to fall back on.
Okay, but that's not the only headache. The other huge problem is something called resource contention. Remember how we said the application and the database are sharing everything, the CPU, the memory? Well, under heavy traffic, they literally start fighting each other for those limited resources. A really intense database query can steal all the processing power, which starves the web application. And what does the user see?
A slow, laggy, frustrating experience. All right, so let's recap. Our simple little server has brought us success, which is great. But now it's completely buckling under the pressure. We've officially hit our first major roadblock. This is that critical moment where the system has to evolve. So what's next? How do we actually solve these growing pains?
Fundamentally, you've got two paths you can take from here. The first is called vertical scaling, or scaling up. This just means making your one server more powerful. You add a faster CPU, you throw in more RAM. It's like giving our single chef a much bigger, fancier kitchen. But there's a hard physical limit to how powerful you can make one machine. So the more common path for big apps is horizontal scaling, or scaling out. This means you just add more servers. Instead of one super chef, you hire a whole team of chefs.
And that brings us right to the critical question that every single successful system eventually has to answer. Your monolith, your single server, it got you here, but it can't take you any further. It's now a single point of failure and a huge resource bottleneck. So what is the very first, most logical step you take to start scaling out? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle in our next explainer.